Hello and welcome to the Sky Sports F1 podcast brought to you by Dropbox. I'm Matt Baker and joining me this week, back from a busy Austin pit lane investigating ride height devices, hobnobbing with pole vaulters, it's Ted Kravitz, and alongside him, Formula One content creator Tom McCluskey. Hello to both of you. Ted, great to see you back. How are things? How was your weekend in Austin?
Hello, Matthew. Hello, Tomo. Hello, everybody. Not bad at all. You forgot Sting, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Which I'm afraid to say, and I'm quite happy to mark myself out as, the least cool member of the Sky F1 team. But I do love the music of Sting and the Police. And it was a life thrill. You could probably tell by my sort of stunted interview of when I did. I was Sting. It's lovely to see. Could you tell the nerves in my voice? He's such a legend. He's such a legend. I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know whether to address him as Gordon or Sting. He was with Jordan, who works for Formula One, and I kind of gave Jordan a look, and it's like, is it okay to talk to Gordon / Sting? And she was like, yeah. And then I said, excuse me, Sting, could I have a quick word? British television, fellow Brit. And he said, first of all, he said, what? And so he pulled out this tiny earplug. Sorry, Matt, this probably wasn't the anecdote you were expecting.
No, I know.
He pulled out this tiny earplug. He says, I'm so sorry, I'm deaf. And I said, join the club. Everyone's deaf in Formula One because of, on account of the engines. And he said, I said, can I have a quick word? He said, yeah, of course, yeah. He said, you'll have to talk up though, because I'm deaf. I said, yeah, all right, Sting, I get the picture. So I said, how was yesterday? He said, well, there were 60,000 people. I think they all had a good time. I was like, well, I'm sure they did. I wish I was there. I wasn't able to be there, unfortunately, because obviously being the most uncool member of the Sky F1 team, nobody else wanted to come with me to the Sting concert. And I would have had
that's a shame.
I know.
I bet they went
Savage.
to Eminem.
They did. They all went to Eminem, and I didn't. And I had to go. I wouldn't have been able to get back. Well, I suppose I could have called a ride-sharing company. But anyway, and then I said, what I really wanted to say was, tell me about your set you're doing. He's doing a world tour at the moment. Well, I said not obviously, but he is doing a world tour. And I was going to say, are you doing like mostly acoustic? Are you with the 4-piece band? Are you got a bigger band? You got a horn section? What? And instead I just said, oh, great energy on the grid. And he's like, yeah, it's a bit like backstage, And I was like, okay, thanks, Sting. And then when I got home, my wife, who's also, very uncool and like me, said, oh my God, you got to meet Sting. I was like, yeah, I know, he's great, isn't he? So many things I wanted to talk to Sting about. I want to talk about the drum riff in Spirits in the Material World. I want to talk about bass lines in I Can't Stand Losing You and all of this stuff. And I just sort of blathered my way through the interview. So you forgot about that. Yes, Mondo Duplantis.
Yeah.
With Matthew, were you happy with me? I asked him your question.
I was very happy. I've watched it. I watched it. And
you want to give the listeners some context?
Regular listeners to the podcast will know that in August, we spoke about during the Olympics, we spoke about how pole vaulters transport their poles around the world and the fact that they have to take the pole in its whole entirety onto a plane, and that normally goes in the hold. But there are problems I learned from my other half, who knows more about athletics than me. But apparently pole vaulters are constantly having their poles broken, and it's an absolute nightmare. And there are some similarities with Formula One in terms of logistics of getting parts and front noses and all this sort of stuff around the world. And you put that question to him in the paddock.
Did you notice how I said, can I ask you a stupid question?
Yeah. to kind of alleviate all responsibility
it's not my question.
Matt Baker. Yeah.
I know, Tomo, I basically want to say, there's this guy, Matt Baker, right? He does our podcast. And we were talking about your exploits and brilliant exploits at the Paris Games. And Matt told me he got these terrible problems with poles that they don't separate. I was like, how would a pole work? It would never be strong enough if it broke in two, would it?
No.
If it was detachable. And anyway, it elicited, I mean, Mondo was a bit set back by the stupid question. And he said, well, actually, no, it is. It's a real pain because, you have to go to the outsized baggage belts in airports.
Yeah.
And
he got very, very descriptive, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And he actually said it's a real pain. But I did raise the question whether the Poles flew privately. And he didn't sort of say, he said, no, most of the time it's, normal commercial aviation. But that was another thrill because, he's just... he's the best pole vaulter in the world, and it's always good to to meet people who are the best at what they do in the world. So that was a bit of a thrill too.
Yeah, Tomo, who did you meet this weekend? Anyone that you're seeing world record holders for the pole vault? Anyone?
You know what? I did meet my dog. He was knocking about the house. That's about as starstruck as I got this weekend. Although, Ted, you say you're not cool, but you're a Deadmau5 fan, right? And I'm a huge Deadmau5 fan.
I am.
Surely.
And, Tomo, I wasn't going to get onto this, but did you see the story about the Pirelli trophy?
Oh, what the trophies for Austin? Because they're that cool kind of bear design, whatever they are. But I didn't see the story.
It was going to be a character called Heru. Do you want me to get a picture of Heru up, Matt?
Yes. Maybe describe for our audio listeners as well.
And they sent us a press release, Pirelli, as they always do, because they're very good like that. And they said, this is the trophy for Austin. It's a crazy character we've called Heru, and he's like a hero type thing.
See what they did there, yeah.
And then, strangely, it got to the podium, and did you see Carlos Sainz he just got a tyre, and he bounced it?
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes, and it almost fell off.
And it almost fell off. He was like, what's this trophy? And here we go. And the story, I've got here, Autosport are reporting this story. Pirelli drops US Grand Prix trophy design over potential copyright infringement.
I've got an idea what that might be, that there is a brand that does similar. When I first saw it, I actually thought it was a collaboration with this brand. I won't mention the name just in case it's the wrong one.
Yeah.
It looks very cool, but I'm not surprised. But I guess it has it's got the kind of Mickey Mouse / Deadmau5 ears, but if Deadmau5 can get away with it, then,
Poor Heru. There he is. That's Heru. So that's the Autosport story. Heru.
Yeah.
And poor Heru was not able to be awarded. Charles Leclerc got something else, and Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen got essentially one of those tyres they give to the pole position.
Yeah.
Poor Heru. But if it was Deadmau5, then good trademark copyright enforcement. Well done, Joel.
Another reason to love Deadmau5. Look, it's been 9 minutes and we haven't mentioned really Formula One, so shall we? Shall we?
It's my favorite kind of podcast when we.
Exactly. Yeah, we're now going to have to talk about penalties and all sorts of other things.
The mouse, by the way, Tomo, the mouse is playing Las Vegas, so I'm going to.
Nice.
I'm going to be there.
Oh, nice.
Oh, jealous. Very
Not in the Sphere or in the Sphere?
He could sell out. He could, no problem. He's doing retrospective at the moment, 25 years of the mouse. So he could I'm sure he could sell out the Sphere. I don't believe he's there. I believe he has a regular residency at a popular Las Vegas nightclub, whose name I won't advertise, but you can look at it easily enough online and buy tickets if you're going to be in Vegas. Come along, Tomo.
Love to. Sky, I'll send you the bill.
Okay.
Well, Sky Sports F1 podcast will not be held responsible for the bill that Tomo is about to send to the production manager. Okay, right. This is what we're going to try and get through. We're going to talk about the championship and the state of the championship now after Austin. We've got 5 races left. We're going to get into penalty chat, which, Ted, I might also put in there with tyre chat as you exhale through your mouth, and we're also going to touch on Ferrari's bid for the constructors' title, which has taken they've certainly put in a huge performance in Austin, which would suggest that they're very much in with a shout of both the constructors' title, but maybe even the drivers' title. Who knows? But let's start with the championship check-in, shall we? Ted doesn't agree that Charles in with a shout, but look, I'll give you the state of play in the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen extends his lead to 57 points on 354. Lando Norris in second on 297. Charles Leclerc, with that win, pushes him up to 275. That's now only a 22-point gap to Lando Norris. So if he's not going for the championship, well, obviously he's going for the championship, but if he doesn't end up winning that, certainly Lando and Charles now perhaps might be more evenly matched in a battle. To the Constructors' Championship, McLaren on 544 points. They're 40 points ahead of Red Bull. Red Bull are on 504. Ferrari on 496. That's only 8 points behind Red Bull. So 8-point gap essentially with 5 races left and a lot of points still on the table. Shall we start with... Well, sorry, Ted, I was going to do a what I've learned actually with you, wasn't I? Do you want to see if that will feed into your kind of review of the weekend? And tell me, Ted, what did you learn this weekend?
Yeah, let's... so hang on a sec. What is the gap to... The only reason I frowned is that I hadn't worked out the gap between Max and Leclerc and the drivers.
Max and Leclerc. Well,
60
it's
something.
a 22-point gap between Lando and Charles, and it's 57 between Max and Lando. So 57 plus 22 is...
79?
89?
What? 79, isn't it?
79. Yeah. We'll edit that out. That's all good.
79. Quick maths, boys. Come on. Look alive.
So look, 79 points with 5 to go. A couple of sprint races in there. Yeah, sure. It's a push, isn't it? It's probably not going to happen.
That was the only reason I frowned.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so what did I learn apart from that? Sting is in great shape for somebody of his. I mean, it must be, what great shape Sting is in. He was wearing these yoga. Sorry to keep going on about Sting.
No.
He was wearing like these yoga trousers, or these sort of loose trousers, and I kind of expected him to be. He was about like 5'11", 6 foot, I think, and he was as slim as you like. He is in great shape. Anyway, what did I learn? I learned that this is one of those races that could be summed up with your previous first question in these podcasts, which was, do you have a one-word review for the race? And it kept coming back to me. What I learned is that there were so many more similarities with a Texas rodeo, this Grand Prix. So, right, in Austin, there are two events that are more popular than the Grand Prix. There's South by Southwest, Austin City Limits. So South by Southwest is a arts festival, film and media and arts festival. Austin City Limits, which is a music festival, and the Texas. There are 3 more events. Sorry, that they're more popular than the Grand Prix, and the Texas Rodeo is the other one. And I know I kept on saying it on the notebook at the end, but it just did strike me that this was, a particular Texas rodeo, and that with the Max and the Lando thing, this is not Max's first rodeo. He knows how to drive, he knows how to defend, he knows how to make sure that he's not the one getting penalties. And it's, in a world where the cowboys ride the prancing horses, it was the prancing horses that won the rodeo. And I don't think they get enough credit in rodeos generally. It tends to be cowboys. And the bulls are prancing once again. And they've seen off their problems. They've solved their issues. They've made a step forward. And that is why Max is going to be this year's world champion.
Simple as that. Well, you say that they've... Sorry, Tom, I will come to you in a second. Just want to pick you up on that, Ted. You said that they've solved their issues, and that was with the upgrade package, right, that came at the start of Austin.
Yeah, you're about to say they got beaten by 2 Ferraris.
Yeah, it was still 19 seconds behind... behind Ferraris, behind Charles. So yes, have they solved their problem against McLaren? But coming up the rear is Ferrari.
I know what you mean. I take your point. I'm sure everybody is thinking he was only third, but there was something in the attitude of everyone at Red Bull. There was something in Max's attitude. There was something in the way that Horner spoke, that Christian Horner, the Red Bull boss, that I just felt they made progress. And there was something about those last 3 weeks since Singapore that they found something. And all right, they're not quite there yet, but very much. And Max beating Lando, putting points on Lando, it felt like a turning point. And I think the Red Bull wobble is over. But yes, I take your point. They did get beaten by 2 Ferraris.
Okay. I mean, Tomo, in terms of how Lando will feel after this weekend, and let's leave the penalty chat for a little bit later on in the podcast. But in terms of coming away, we would have had those 3 weeks off. We'll have been not wanting the 3 weeks off, I would imagine, because of the momentum was firmly with McLaren. And he comes out of Austin and he's now further behind Max in the championship.
Look, I think it was always a stretch. It's still mathematically possible. Of course, it takes one DNF either way. Big point swing. There's still 5 opportunities for that, plus sprints. Look, I don't realistically think that Lando had to maximise every weekend for the remainder of the season and also hope that Max slips up somewhat. But it's far too competitive at the top of Formula One for that to be a not unrealistic scenario, but a probable scenario, right? You had Ferrari excelling at a track around Austin and they barely updated the car. Like this isn't a Ferrari that's brought loads of upgrades to Austin and suddenly they're winning by 20 seconds clear. Charles was almost 19 seconds clear of Max in the end, a 1-2. And you go to Zandvoort, Lando's dominant, but then, and Singapore, but then earlier in the season around Spa, you got the Mercedes being strong, you got Max winning at the start of the season. This season, it's so close at the front that different tracks are exploiting weaknesses in these top cars, and there's not a consistent front-running car right now anymore. I think, it's been easy to say, the McLaren has, and maybe there was a period where the McLaren was the most dominant over the broadest variety of tracks, but I don't think between now and the end of the season that's going to be the case. Mexico, I think the Red Bull will be strong. Vegas, I expect the Ferrari to be up there. McLaren will probably be decent around, I imagine like Interlagos, it would probably be pretty good. Mercedes, who knows, they might pop up somewhere. They had a stinker this weekend. So it was always a long shot for Lando. It's still possible, but I think Singapore was the result, really. Even though Lando won by the margin he did, the fact that Max got P2 around a track that, everyone was expecting them to struggle, and for him to pull out the result he did, to only lose, 7 points to Lando that weekend. I think that was the weekend he won the championship, but this only confirmed it. The job he did in the sprint as well. I mean, that sprint pole lap that he put in, he wasn't the quickest in any sector, but he just put the lap together, delivered the race victory, and then damage limitation. I mean, the fact he got the podium he got the podium on Sunday when Lando's coming at him at the speed he was, and Max did what he had to do to keep him behind. And we'll get onto the incident, the contentious one. But up until that point, it was some incredible defending from Max Verstappen. Don't get it twisted. Like it was top tier. And like Ted says, I think it's done.
Does it come down to, Ted, then, that your analogy of the rodeo, it's not Max's first rodeo. This is a guy who knows how to win championships. And he's just stuck in there, hasn't he? Every turn, pretty much, he's been able to keep that buffer and that lead. And now, it's such an uphill task, isn't it, for Lando to contemplate? What is it, 11.6 points per race for the next 5 he'd have to take off Max, which Max isn't going to drop 11.6 points to Lando a race, is he?
Yeah, just to, no, it's very unlikely now. It keeps going up. It was 8 points, then it was 8.9 points, and now it's
23, 24.
Yeah,
really.
And just to sort of, mangle the rodeo analogy, even more, it's just a different category, really. Max can go out there. He can handle the horses are the prancing horses, the bucking broncos, aren't they? A bronco is a horse, so he can handle the prancing horses. And what Lando learnt, that the bull riding ones, where you have to actually hold on to the bull and the bull tries to push you, do you off, throw you off, is actually something that Lando needs a little bit more practice on, I think, because he's not managed to best Max in Austin. I mean, he did in, previous races, he managed to overtake him, but he just needs to be a little bit sort of more rodeo hardened, doesn't he, Lando? But he will have, it's all good learning for next season.
Before we continue the podcast, a quick word from our sponsors, Dropbox, because we all know that victories in F1 can be won or lost by the finest of margins, and it's the reason that data plays such a crucial role in a team's success. In fact, over a race weekend, 1.5 terabytes of data is collected per team. That's a lot of data. As a technology partner of the McLaren Formula One team, Dropbox is trusted for its fast, secure and reliable syncing and sharing capabilities, which helps the team quickly search and manage this huge amount of content and data. If you would like to find out more, you can get an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at how Dropbox fuels the McLaren Formula One team's speed and performance by visiting dropbox.com/McLaren F1. And of course, a big thank you to Dropbox for sponsoring this podcast. Should we move on just to talk about the Ferrari story that's coming up? Because as I mentioned, their form has been pretty good over the last few races. I want to cast your mind back though to a run that Charles Leclerc had. Right, so he wins in Monaco, and then he has a DNF in Canada. He finishes 5th in Spain, 11th in Austria, and 14th at Silverstone. This was sort of the most miserable time in the Ferrari season. And then they've just gone on this superb run, haven't they? 2 podiums in Belgium and the Netherlands. They won the Italian Grand Prix, 2nd in Azerbaijan, 5th in Singapore. But then he's just won the US Grand Prix. So Tomo, when Charles looks back at this season, regardless of whether they might end up winning the constructors, but when he looks back at this season, he'd be pretty chuffed, isn't he, with winning the races that he's won in the manner that he's done it.
Yeah, look, I think that there's no team this season at the front that has consistently done it throughout the year. Mercedes have had their moment. Red Bull had their moment at the start of the year. You know, Ferrari had their moment, and that's been sprinkled around. And then, of course, McLaren as well. There has been no single team that has, and that's why we've had such a compelling fight, particularly in the constructors. I think he's got to be somewhat satisfied. But it's been a long time now while Charles has been at that Ferrari team. When he joined in 2019, he was winning in his first season. Could have won. What was the race? Was it Bahrain when he was going to win, and then he had that issue or whatever? Like in his first season in F1, like he knows what it's like to drive a Ferrari to race victories. This is a very well trodden path for Charles. So sure, he'll be happy with a few victories, but he'll also, and I'm sure Lando at the end of the year will reflect in the same way. And because I'm very much assuming Max is going to win this title now. Carlos as well, given he missed a race and then came back and won earlier this year as well, which was like super impressive. That, all of these, there's 3 teams at the top really. Mercedes, it's not been anywhere near consistent enough that, if they'd have just carried this through a bit more, they could have mounted a genuine drivers' championship fight. And we've got 3 teams within 48 points at the top of the constructors. That just tells you everything, really. And the fact that it's so lopsided at Red Bull with Max, 354 points, Checo on 150. It speaks volumes to how competitive finally Formula One has got after one of the most dominant seasons of all time in 2023. And we are on for a hell of a 2025. I can't wait.
Yeah, all eyes pointing to that, and yeah, it's certainly very exciting. So Ted, can Ferrari do it? Could they win the constructors' title?
They can. I think what was good about Singapore, as Thomas says, is that that was a kind of outlier. They kind of messed up in Singapore. But the crucial thing for me for this last one was that the upgrade that was on in Monza and then didn't really show itself in Singapore because they didn't get the best out of the car. And what was your question to Tom O'Matt about whether Leclerc? It was about Leclerc. And I think the weird thing is that Leclerc actually wasn't the form driver in Austin for Ferrari. That was Sainz. And Sainz overtook Leclerc in the sprint race, did he not? And started ahead of him on the grid for the Grand Prix, even though, of course, Leclerc didn't manage to get his last try in because of the Russell crash. So it was Sainz who was 3rd on the grid, Leclerc 4th, and it was only because Sainz, because of that positioning, that it meant that Leclerc was able just to sort of be on the inside, cut inside of all 3 of them. Sainz Verstappen and Norris, and then take the lead, and was never really troubled by Carlos Sainz after that. So it's hard to know if Leclerc was just always the faster Ferrari driver in the weekend and never got the brakes because it didn't happen in the sprint for whatever reason, and then he didn't get his final run in qualifying. But that is a save and a half from Charles Leclerc for this race when it looked like Sainz was the performant driver. So it's I think to answer your question, Leclerc will look back on the season. He won the sort of three of, well, so far, marquee events of Monaco, Monza, and the USA. I wouldn't be surprised if he win one more. And then it's next year he's got to worry about, is the car good enough, and a certain Mr. L. Hamilton alongside him.
Just before we perhaps talk about Lewis's impressions of what's going on at Ferrari at the moment, I thought Carlos, when he spoke in the press conference on Thursday, was quite interesting, talking about how motivated he is to lead this team into their sort of final 6, now 5 races. It probably is going to be his last chance of a podium for a while in his Formula One career. If he's obviously moving to Williams, I think it's going to be a season, 2 seasons, a bit longer maybe before he's able to compete for podiums. So if you're Carlos Sainz, you're sitting there going, I really want another win here. I really want another podium because I don't know when the next one is coming. And I thought that was quite interesting how putting yourself in his shoes at the moment, and also look, if they end up winning the constructors' title, what an incredible way for Carlos Sainz to sign off his Ferrari career. Yes, he won't have won a driver's title with them, but I'll tell you what, that would be pretty special. Tomo, I can see you nodding.
It's so important for him to keep his stock level as high as possible because we just don't know what's going to happen during this time at Williams and going into 2026. Everything's up in the air. All of these victories and all of these points that he's bringing in for Ferrari now, and if he can help bring a Constructors' Championship to Ferrari for the first time in, I don't know, when was it last time they won it? I'm not actually sure.
2008, I think.
There you go.
2008.
There you go. So, it's been an awful long time, and I think that won't get forgotten because, look, he's not being replaced by Hamilton on the fact that he's not driving badly. Like, I think them two were a perfect combination. I think Lewis is the only driver who could come in and replace Carlos Sainz at that team. It's Lewis Hamilton. He's a 7-time world champion and everything that comes with that. But yeah, I think it's absolutely imperative for Carlos Sainz's career. He's 30 now. So he's in the prime of his career. And if it works at Williams, that would be great. But if it doesn't, he said it himself, he wouldn't write off a return to Ferrari one day, maybe. You don't want to burn those bridges, and he's doing a fantastic job right now.
I just wonder, Ted, as Lewis, was it lap 3, wasn't it? He was spun in the gravel, and he sees a 1-2 for Ferrari. I just wonder if that weekend kind of sums up perhaps a little bit of his feelings and his next steps in his Formula One career. He will be sitting there probably feeling like he's made the right decision for 25. Is that fair?
I think even if Ferrari weren't winning races, he'd think, look, it's not, it changes. It's weird. It changes, doesn't it, from race to race? You could say that when Mercedes had a great Grand Prix and then Ferrari, Singapore, for example. It wasn't. Where did Mercedes finish? Were they on the podium in Singapore? Was George on the podium in Singapore? He was, wasn't he? Anyway, quick fact check, Matt, please.
Yes.
But you get races where Ferrari are not doing great and Mercedes are. You think, oh, Lewis, might be thinking, oh, what's going on at Ferrari? And then the same thing you get. If you're Ferrari, you look at a race when Lewis maybe is having a bit of a shocker and having a spin like that, and they think, oh, what's going on with Lewis? And then the next race, Lewis is on the podium and he's doing fantastic, and Ferrari thought, cool, we've got a winner, we've got a winner here, and everything is fine. So listen, I don't think either of them are worried about it. Lewis can't wait to get going with Ferrari. He says that in press conferences whenever we ask him. Ferrari can't wait to have him. It's all good. They're looking forward to it. So red trousers, the power of red trousers.
And the thing is as well, where these cars are so close at the front, and that will only converge more, I think, going into next year. Okay, let's say 3 teams, right, are good enough to win any Grand Prix, and then the nuances of each individual track and the characteristics associated with that will, see one, like Team A will be good this weekend, and then B and C. But then, so that's the difference between P1 and P6. So then you go to another track, and all of a sudden, a team that was, quickest around a track like Zandvoort, you go to Monza, and then they might be 5th and 6th, which sounds really bad on paper, but as it all coalesces and comes together, you're going to see them spreads in position. And, I think it's just, we're getting to a place right now where I think as well, the drivers are really making a difference, and there's more emphasis than ever on the drivers wringing their neck out of their respective cars, because you make one slight mistake. And again, we saw this in the battle between Max and Lando. It's such fine margins, right? And there's a 6-point swing if Lando finishes ahead of Max, because it's 15 points to 12. And, that can determine a championship at the end of it. So yeah, again, 24, this has been a great season, but 2025 surely is going to cook, surely.
Can I correct myself? It was, of course, Piastri who was on the podium in Singapore.
Yes, I was about to.
Along
add.
with,
yes,
I know it's stupid.
4th place for George Russell.
Do you remember? I did the notebook from the McLaren photo, and it said Norris 1, Piastri 3. So I should have known. Of course, Max was in the middle in that sort of lonely race for second. Yes, sorry, just to correct myself. Sorry, carry on, Matthew.
No, very good. Well, I was actually going to move us on to penalty chat. We sort of teased this at the beginning, so perhaps let's get into it. But I think rather than go too deep into the specific incident straight off, I think what would be good to help people at home understand is how decisions are made in Formula One, how ultimately our sport is refereed, as it were. So there were a couple of points when there this weekend, a couple of penalties issued. I mean, we had Piastri in the sprint race. We had George Russell get a penalty as well for an incident with Valtteri Bottas. Obviously, the one that has got the most attention is Lando Norris at the end of the race with Max Verstappen on Sunday. So, Ted, perhaps the first place to start, could you give us a potted summary of how Formula One is refereed? Who are the key players, and how does the chain of events happen?
Right. I should have got this up before, but there is a little paragraph at the bottom of Stewards' decisions, which really sort of sums it up. And so I've deleted them all. Right. I'll get it says
memory
Stewards,
test.
I'll find it while Tom was giving his answer. It says Stewards' decisions are made independently of the FIA and are dependent on the rules that are set. So the rules are set. The interpretation of those rules is agreed on by the teams and the drivers and the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and everybody knows how the interpretation of those rules are going to be. And then based on that, the stewards look at or the race director gives, an instruction to the stewards, or the stewards can look at an incident themselves. They can say, A, was a regulation breached, or was a racing guideline breached? And if it was, then what is the consistent penalty, the penalty that's consistent with previous decisions? And it's as simple as that, really. So if you're Lando and you pass outside the track, even bearing in mind that, as Red Bull say, as McLaren say, Max was also outside the track, but only a little bit outside the track. Only sort of technically, Lando was properly off the track. Then the stewards say, okay, what is the regulation? What does the guideline say? Guideline says, was he fully ahead or predominantly ahead at the apex? They decided no, he wasn't, because I think the apex, at that point, they were judging it as the middle of the corner, which is the normal judgment of an apex. And McLaren was saying, it was a bit early of the apex and he was alongside or ahead when they turned in. And then once they decide that it was a breach of the guidelines, then it's simple. Then they look at what the penalty is, and the penalty is a 5-second penalty. Unless, now the other confusion is that, all right, track limits, you can talk all about that. In the olden days, there was a race director's opinion, and the team could say to either Charlie Whiting or any of his successors, and it seems like Niels Wittich now doesn't get involved, and so just says, it's not me, it's with the stewards. But I think this would be a more elegant way of doing it. Charlie Whiting could have said, you could put it to the stewards, but I don't fancy your chances. And that was Charlie's way of saying, I think you should give the place back. And that enabled, and that was part of Lando's frustration afterwards at his own team, of saying, look, if you thought it was borderline and that I was going to get this penalty, tell me, I'll give him the place back on the same lap and then have another go somewhere else and try to do it cleanly. So that was the other thing. And the other thing, of course, if he knows he's going to get a 5-second penalty, then make sure you build the 5-second gap to Max so that the penalty will be negated. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's quite simple, actually.
Yeah, and obviously during a race we see them pop up, don't we, on the graphics? We and that's the same for broadcasters as well. You'll see it on your race screen. It says so and so has been referred to the stewards. But also there's a period after the race, isn't there, where things are investigated retrospectively, and everyone gets all broadcasters and teams, they get a document, don't they, which sort of suggests the charges, if you like, and then there's another document issued with the result. Is that all correct, Ted?
Yes. Sorry, were you after more detail, Matthew?
Well, no, I just so people at home can understand the kind of. I always think it's quite interesting the mechanics of how this sort of stuff happens. You know, you're on a mailing list, aren't you? All broadcasters are. All teams are, I assume. I mean, how do the teams find out they get a penalty?
They are told by the internal system that they have. Hang on a sec. I am on a mailing list, but at the end of each weekend. When I'm either waiting to get the plane or at the end of it, I delete all of the emails from the FIA.
to briefly interject, I do actually think that
help me out, Tom.
That this is, I'll buy you some time, Ted. The fact that this is a question we're asking on this podcast, I think is a problem. I feel like transparency is the key here. I think these things should be open and clear and obvious. I don't think it, in terms of how this is, how the decision making is gone about. It doesn't matter what the incident, whether it was George and Valtteri, Lando and Max, whatever it is. Okay, even the stuff prior to this weekend with the whole bib Red Bull floor thing. I don't understand there feels like there's a conscious effort, and I could be wrong here, right, to try and keep some of this information kind of low key so that it potentially maybe it doesn't produce as volatile a reaction, especially obviously with social media and online, right? But also, if you don't tell, you can't win either way, because if you don't communicate these things and then leave it, for example, with the Red Bull bib thing, it was Red Bull who came out and were like, oh yeah, it's ours. Then that just, that however you go about it, there's people who will look upon these things and frown upon these things and agree and disagree. It doesn't matter whether you're open and obvious about it or you keep it closed, because people are going to have a reason to be suspicious either way. So just be open. I mean, I'm looking at football at the minute with, VAR and how refereeing decisions are made and how they are communicated afterwards and explained. And I think that's really important to fans to see how these things are explained, even if it's, I don't know, the FIA doing a verbal version of the documents that are put out afterwards in terms of, right, this is why Lando was given a 5-second, for example, and just have someone like explain exactly why. I think Anthony Davidson did a really good breakdown, and I think Jensen had some good rebuttals on the Sky coverage, but I don't see why this can't come from the FIA and from the horse's mouth as such, right? From the people who are actually making these decisions, because I think that would allow the fan base to at least, again, we're not all going to agree. This is sport, right? And that's part of the beauty of it. But just give us all the information and let us make our own decisions and let us understand why these decisions are being made.
And Formula One is unique because you can't, like a football match, stop the race to make a decision normally, unless there's obviously a red flag or whatever, or under a safety car, they get a bit more thinking time, but you can't stop it. So these decisions either have to be made quite quickly. One of what Lando said afterwards was he was frustrated that it was and I quote, rash decision. He said they don't hear or understand our points, which they should do after the race. They just want to make a decision at the time so they don't alter points and podiums and things like that. So Lando feels like if he'd had a chance to put his point across, the outcome might have been different.
Well, no, he's never going to be able to put his point across in the middle of a race, is he? But I think what he's saying, and as I said, the elegant way of doing it is is for the race director, now Niels Wittich, but he doesn't want to do this, is to say, I don't fancy your chances in front of the stewards, or, I think you should give the place back. Surely that's the more elegant way of doing it. Anyway, I've got the details here. So this is the stewards, having received a report from the race director, considered the following. So the race director would say that Lando left the track and gained a lasting advantage. That's the fact, the time. The infringement, it's Article 33.3 of the sporting regulations. And they say that he was overtaking Max on the outside, but was not level with Max at the apex, as I said. Therefore, under the driving standards guidelines, what are these driving standard guidelines? Who writes them? Who agrees to them? Can we have a look at them? I'm thinking you might want to ask about next. A car 4, Lando had lost the right to the corner. Accordingly, as Lando left the track and returned in front of Max, it's deemed to be a case of leaving the track and gaining a last advantage. So that's pretty logical, isn't it? A 5-second penalty is imposed instead of the 10-second penalty recommended in the guidelines. So the guidelines are pretty a bit stronger on this. Because having committed the overtaking move on the outside, Lando had little alternative other than leave the track because of the proximity of Max, which had also left the track. In the view of the above, we also determined this will not count as a track limit strike for Lando. So that was the other thing that Red Bull was saying, oh, well, Lando's going to get a penalty anyway because he's just left the track for the 4th time. The steward said, no, we're going to let him off that because he was forced out. So interestingly, that it was going to be a 10-second penalty, but they sort of commuted it to a 5-second penalty. And just to underline what I said earlier, this a couple of bits of blurb, Matt, at the end of all stewards' decisions. They say that competitors are reminded they have the right to appeal certain decisions within the applicable time limits. And then this last paragraph, decisions of the stewards are taken independently of the FIA and are based solely on the relevant regulations, guidelines, and evidence presented. And that is clear that that's what the stewards in Austin did. They based them on the relevant regulations, the sporting guidelines, the driving standards guidelines, the old DSGs, and the evidence presented. Can we have a look at the DSGs?
But what? Yeah, I mean,
where are these driving
literally, what does the driving standard, the DSGs, what does that look like physically? Is that a document with sort of diagrams of kind of car A and car B and lines and drawings? Like, is it?
Yeah, I think it is a document with drawings. Yeah, I mean, I've seen bits of it, but. Yeah, maybe we'll make that. Shall I make that my my duty at my next race in Brazil?
Is there a reason we as a fan base don't have access to that information? Is there a good reason? Because I'm not seeing one personally. Like, I feel like we as a fan base, we're going to have opinions. We're going to talk on these things, and it's, you can have what you believe racing should be is one thing, but also if this is within the rules as they are written, then. Okay, fair game, right? You don't hate the player, hate the game. But why aren't the fan base privy to this information? That's what I'd ask.
I know. I think that's a very valid point. There seems no logical reason for them not to be involved. On the point of the stewards, George Russell raised an interesting point. Funnily enough, Gunther Steiner was pretty strong on this in his recent book, which we had him on the podcast recently. He was talking about how if you have the same stewards at every race, it adds an extra level of consistency. So George said, I think we'd probably all want to see the same stewards all year long so that the drivers and the stewards can all be on the same page and we can apply common sense when needed rather than having to follow the letter of the law. That's kind of pointing to what you were saying, Ted, about having kind of someone having a bit more of a kind of overview of it and going, oh, actually, I'd recommend this or I'd recommend that, knowing what I know. Tomo, you're sort of nodding your head, agreeing with George.
100,000,000%.
I've got an early Christmas present for you, or rather, I've got a late Christmas present for you. You will have the driving standards guidelines on just after Christmas, on the 1st of January 2025. For that is when, say, the FIA, the guidelines will be integrated and published within Appendix L of the International Sporting Code, which is available. So that was from the announcement, which was a bit earlier this year. The FIA Drivers Committee delivers driving standards guidelines for circuit racing championships. We've got a quote here from Fernando Alonso. from Brendan Hartley, the World Endurance Championship driver and ex-Formula One driver, and Ronan Morgan, president of the Drivers' Committee, formerly known as the Drivers' Commission. We got 3 quotes there. I think Karun has been involved, hasn't he? Karun Chandok and Emanuele Pirro. Karun said that they've had some influence or some tips on what should go in and what shouldn't. But it seems that, your wish will be granted, Tomo, on 1st of January. Happy New Year, 2025. They'll be integrated with an Appendix L of the International Sporting Code.
I can't wait. I'm going to set a calendar reminder on my phone.
But to be fair, and still to the point you've raised, Tomo, it's not, if it comes in a document form, it's not accessible to an audience at home, really, is it? I mean, who's going to sit through and read these regulations? Even fans of F1, are they going to read these regulations? I'm not sure people are going to sit through and read a document.
I feel like a post-race breakdown of any contentious issues from people at the FIA, informed who are actually understand the decision making. I don't think that's, in my opinion, that's not too much to ask. You know, if you can stand by your decisions, then that's fine. And again, people are always going to critique the referees of any sport. Okay, and I understand that things often go too far on social media, and you have to somewhat try and protect those who officiate, because, you know, sports fans, there's always going to be a minority who take things too far. But at the end of the day, like, broadly speaking, just help us as a broader fan base, who the majority just, you know, taking the nuance and trying to understand these things as best as possible. But if we don't know how these rules are being applied, because again, with that Max and Lando incident, there seemed to be a lot of contradictions and good arguments on either side. And of course, Christian's going to promote what supports Max, and of course, Andrea Stella's going to promote what supports Lando. But at the end of the day, just help us understand. And I think just transparency is the order of the day, as far as I'm concerned.
No, you're right, Tomo. And better still, you know, let's not have what Andrea Stella called a beautiful bit of motor racing end in something that has to be judged by the stewards. You know, let's have either the track having a bit of runoff or grass or gravel there, so that Lando would think, well, I can't go out there because then I'll spin off, or I'll bin in the gravel. I'll brake a bit earlier, cut inside and continue the beautiful bit of motor racing. Or let's have the position where, you know, we just don't rely on the stewards' decisions, and they can quickly remedy it and then go for another fight, and it doesn't have to be involved in the stewards at all.
100%. Because it was such a good battle up until that point, and I think
it's brilliant. Yeah,
there's a risk that gets forgotten. Like, Max was doing like that. It was a defensive masterclass, and Lando was trying his best, and Max just wouldn't let him up the inside. That's the thing. Lando let Max up the inside into turn 1, and Max got it done. There wasn't Max didn't give Lando any shot at the inside, and he's battle hardened. He's been there, done that, and it was great. And it's just, this point comes in when it goes back to the stewards again, and it's this contentious decision, and it's just a shame. It's a shame.
It's not Max's first rodeo, Matthew. It's not Max's first rodeo.
What a lovely cyclical way to round off this podcast, Ted. Lovely stuff.
At the end, I have another. We haven't finished yet, have we? I have another cowboy story to tell you. Sorry, go on.
Oh, very good. Shall I do the promos and then?
No. I thought there was some other stuff about the race we were going to cover.
Esteban Ocon's fastest lap.
Well, that was just hilarious. That was great. You wouldn't have thought that Alpine, and giving Esteban Ocon quite a tall order, actually, to actually set the fastest lap in an Alpine, albeit on the soft tyres, but he still managed to take it away from Colapinto. I thought Colapinto, a very assured race drive. I thought Liam Lawson was really kind of the story of the day, really going forward and getting a couple of points from the back of the field. And just looking at all of the stuff that you look at, you know, online, the team radio, Lawson's engineer was lost for words, wasn't he? He was like, I don't have any words to say that. How do we do? And Liam said, how do we do that? And he said, well, you were just quick. So, you know, regretfully, if we have to ask, and love Daniel Ricciardo as I do, Did they make the right decision? Well, it seems on the base of Austin that yes, they did, although I guess we'll never know what Ricciardo would have been able to achieve. And B, what's that going to mean for the future of Checo Perez? And Checo really needs a big result from Mexico, doesn't he, this weekend to stave off the sort of coming force of Liam Lawson, who thought we'd be talking in those terms, and Franco Colapinto as well. Something I should say, actually, that I caught up with James Vowles in the on the plane on the way home yesterday, it would have been. What I didn't say when I said that Alex Albon has got something to think about, because look at how good Colapinto is. This is the first proper test that Alex Albon's had as a teammate at Williams, is that apparently Albon's diffuser was shot to pieces by somebody who actually crashed into him and pushed him round when he pushed Ocon round. And I didn't actually manage to catch up and see that yet. So Albon was running sort of significant diffuser damage there as well. But well done Haas, well done Colapinto, well done Liam Lawson. And do you want my story? Do you want my cowboy story now, or should we end?
Well, I was just to round that off, for the sort of third or fourth time to echo 2025. Well, I guess we're not going to have Franco Colapinto, are we, in 2025?
Well,
certainly
maybe.
Certainly for Williams, he's not going to be there. Possibly the Sauber team might be after his services, but yeah, we've got some exciting prospects. Young prospects coming into Formula One, haven't we, to G us up for 25, as well as these incredible cars that seemingly we can all run pretty close to.
You know what, as well, what's really interesting about Franco Colapinto, which I find most exciting about it, is that he was running 7th, I believe, in Formula 2 when he got plucked out and put into the Williams alongside Alex. 7th. And he was having, I think in F3 he'd finished, I could be wrong here, I think he finished 3rd and then 9th the year before that. So again, okay, but nothing, Gabriel Bortoleto might go back to back this year. He done an okay job, but nothing. Like Christian said this, a lot of people said they weren't really paying attention to him. He's come in, he's hit the ground running in a Williams, and he's smashed it. He's done a great job. So how many other drivers could have F1 potential, right? To be at least a mid-level F1 driver, sitting in Formula 2, and whether it's through not the right machinery or just not suited to the nuances of this new Formula 2 car, and won't get a shot in F1. It does call into, look, no series, whether it's IndyCar or Super Formula or whatever, no open wheel series is going to reflect one-to-one with F1 and the new one. I remember, was it Vitantonio Liuzzi? I remember there was an interview, I don't know if you did it, Ted, you bumped into him maybe, and he was saying about how karting is closer to F1 than the junior formulas. So these teams need to try and find the next generation, and whether it's an Arvid Lindblad, for example, at Red Bull, who's done, well in F3, he's not won it. What's the correlation? It's really difficult for teams to find, you could have a guy who's quality in F2, but just doesn't apply that same level of quality to F1, or vice versa. And I think Franco has shown that it's really difficult.
Yep, could be Colapinto. I agree with all of that. And I think Gabriel Bortoleto and Isaac Hadjar, it could then be as good as Colapinto or even better. Well, they're leading him at the moment, aren't they? There's someone at the door.
But there's no guarantee of that. That's the thing as well, right?
Yeah.
Just because they're ahead of him in F2 doesn't necessarily.
Ted, very quickly, do you want to tell us your cowboy story?
Right, yes, let's wrap it up. So, while I was researching, while you were asking me, well, you didn't even ask, but I thought, what's going to be my one word summing up of the Austin Grand Prix, and I was looking at rodeos and how the prancing horses won and the bulls were victorious over their immediate championship contenders. I went down somewhat of a cowboy and rodeo sort of rabbit hole on the internet. Wouldn't recommend it, but I've come up with a great movie idea, and I can't believe this is not being done. Did you know that the kind of Max Verstappen, or maybe it should be the Lewis Hamilton of the rodeo world, was a chap from North Carolina called J.B. Mauney, Mauney, if you want to look it up. And J.B., amazing looking guy, fantastic cheekbones, there's an incredible cowboy look to him. And he's regarded as being kind of the greatest ever cowboy in the world. He's amazing on the bucking bronco, on the bulls. He was one of the bull riders. Bull rider, yeah, he was a bull rider, one of the best that was ever competing. And it all was going well until he was in the autumn of his career, and he got on a bull called Arctic Assassin. And
Great name for a bull.
Arctic Assassin, this huge bull, bucked JB off. JB fell badly, broke his neck, and had to retire from. Survived, but it was the end of his cowboying career. And as he came to terms with the end of being, the greatest ever, JB went to Arctic Assassin's owner and he said, "I'd like to adopt this bull." And the owner said, "You know what? That's good, because we're going to put him into retirement." And now JB Morney and the bull that ended his greatest of all time cowboy career live on the same ranch in Texas. And they are both in retirement. The bull and there are stuff on the internet, if you want to go down the same rodeo rabbit hole that I did, where JB goes into the field and he sees the bull that ended his career. He gives him a little scratch on his back, and they're friends till the end of their days. And that, Matt, is a free movie plot for you. I can't believe that anybody is not already making the movie about JB Morney and Arctic Assassin. Yes, it's a good name for a bucking bull, isn't it? But
really good name for
it's scary. But
I
would prefer sort of Jim or Crazy Phil or something. But
also very good sequel potential.
What happens in the sequel? He comes back. He makes a comeback.
Yeah, sort of circa the Formula One movie with Brad Pitt. He's able to, through the use of technology and whatnot, he's able to meet another surgeon who can put his neck in a position where he's anyway.
Okay.
Right.
Well, if you're an amateur filmmaker or you just want a movie pitch, then
you can have that.
The story. Can't believe it's not being made already, of JB Morney and Arctic Assassin, who ended JB, the greatest ever cowboy, ended his career. Now they live happily together on a ranch in Texas.
Very good. Worth waiting for. Thank you, Ted. Just time to tell you about what's coming up across Sky Sports F1. Well, actually, first, I want to tell you about a podcast with our very own David Croft. He's appearing in another Sky podcast called the Football Museum Podcast. He's talking about his love of F1 and also West Ham as he curates his own exhibit in the virtual Football Museum. Tomo is a West Ham fan. I think you'll probably give that a listen. So if you search Football Museum, wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to find that. That's out this Thursday. And then, of course, we're into another race weekend. The Mexican Grand Prix is this week. Friday, FP1 is on air from 7 p.m. Then the F1 show, sandwiched between the practice sessions, that starts at 9 o'clock. And then a 90-minute FP2 awaits. Join us from 10:45 in the evening. Saturday, FP3 is on air from 6:15. We're then going to build up to qualifying from 9 o'clock for a session start of 10 p.m. Sunday, it's 6:30 on Sky Sports F1 for all the build up before lights out at 8 o'clock. You're not going to be there for the 90-minute FP2 sessions.
Do you want to explain to the nice listeners why it's a 90-minute FP2 session?
Yes, I'm going to refer to Bernie's notes for the exact reason.
Well, it's
because I don't want to get this one wrong.
Spoiler alert, it's a tyre test. You don't need to know any more than that.
Yeah.
It's an extended tyre test, isn't it?
Yeah, extended 90 minutes, known as an in-competition test. And will be dedicated to looking after the next year's compounds. So there you go. 90 minutes on Friday night.
A weekend where we have even more tyre chat, to which, of course, you can tell I'm devastated.
Riveting. Can't wait.
Yeah, tyre chat, penalty chat, all in the same category. On that note, we'll say goodbye. Ted, thank you very much. Tomo, thanks as always. We're going to be back next Tuesday. We'll look back at the Mexican Grand Prix. Hope you can join us then. Bye for now.